Angeli, 102 Saltgrass Trace, St. Mary's. Mr. Mayor, council members, for the general public that hasn't listened to all of the various meetings that we've had relative to this subject, I want to make sure that they're all aware of the fact that you, Mr. Mayor, and all of the council members have put an awful lot of effort, time, studying, and evaluating the total overall effect that this bill will have on the city of St. Mary's. The bill reminds me of a table with a whole bunch of Swiss cheese. You go in one piece in one hole, you come out the other side, and there's another piece, and you got to go in that hole. This bill is not real clear on its face. There are an awful lot of what ifs, ands, maybe, what about. One of the big what abouts is, what about Kingsland opting out at the last minute? Or anyone else for that matter. That removes our ability to enact the floating local option sales tax, which removes one of the mechanisms that our city has to regain the income from the loss. I'd like to just, in 2 minutes or less, read briefly an excerpt from the Tribune and Georgian, February 6th. County St. Mary's discussed possibilities on new legislation. So for the county as a whole, its current homestead exemption is a better deal for local taxpayers than the new one from the legislature. Both exemptions are reset either when the property is sold or when there's a substantial change to the property, and property owners have to apply. Let me reread that. Property owners have to apply to receive either exemption, as neither is automatic. So the onus is going to be on individuals, residents, to take some action if this legislation is enacted by the city. The County Chief Financial Officer, Nancy Clark Gonzalez, explained that the existing county exemption is a better value for taxpayers. The floating homestead exemption does not replace the county's freeze at all. They're supposed to be concurrently active, but the homestead freeze will always really trump the homestead floating exemption. So it's more or less a moot point in having the floating homestead exemption. Commission Chairman Ben Casey expressed that in general he thinks the county would be better off by opting out of the floating exemption. So there are a lot of citizens and residents that they're looking at the bill as being a nice tax break, and it could be for some. If everyone really understood the bill 100% and looked at all of the various iterations that each and every citizen or resident of the city of St. Mary's could go through, I think that many of them might change their mind as far as whether we should opt out or not. I do want to thank Councilmember Keene for asking our finance department for some specific information, which provided some very good insight. Also, thank you very much to the finance department, Marcia's staff, and the entire staff of the city for working so hard, so diligently in trying to get some clarification for all of us in St. Mary's. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Never pass up an open mic.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. I'm Lee Rogers. We're building a home at 106 Island State Landing in Osprey Cove. Thank you for doing this. You were using the Swiss cheese example. I was about to discuss, if you do a regular wiring line diagram, it's kind of straight. This has all the spaghetti loops in here. The things that have already been brought up, I think everybody understands, is the problems of this. Personally, I'm not looking at this as how it's going to reduce my taxes, because we all know if we need the money to run things, we have to bring it in. It's either if you reduce how much your property taxes are, you have to bring up the millage rate to get the money. We just have to do that. So my concern in this is making sure that we're aligned with everybody else around so that we can do this in a smooth organizational manner. How can we best run the government and run things here? So my question is really, do you have a good feeling of what else is going on in the county? I know we don't know yet, we probably won't know, but do you just have a feeling on how other groups are going to be addressing this? You can probably wait until the end of B&P time here, then y'all can get to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can go ahead and address that now.
He didn't state his address. I thought he stated he was building a home at that address. We would need his business
Your
address.
current address, sir?
Current address is 556 Cardinal Circle East, St. Mary.
Thank you. One of the things, like I say, that with the county situation, and if I'm not mistaken, the way the bill reads, if they have a better exemption in place currently, it really doesn't matter whether they opt in or out, because their exemption is better. So that doesn't affect this ability to potentially collect a floss down the road. So, and as the city manager was explaining, if we do vote in a floss by referendum, that would allow us to take that dollar for dollar and push down the millage rates for that incoming money that's coming in through the floss. But like I say, so it doesn't really matter. You know, the county may make a decision administratively that, you know, they don't want to track both or whatever, but they're going to, I think they're going to have to, the way the other part of the bill is, they're going to have to track not only the fair market value, the fixed exemption that they currently have that's available to everyone, as well as this floating level. So they're going to have to track all three, whether they want to or not, apparently from the legislation. So the city of Kingsland, I haven't spoken to them in the last couple of days. I tried to seek out the mayor at their oyster roast in Kingsland that he did not attend, but I did. So I'll poke him there. But I think he actually was unable to come, but so I'll let him off the hook. But last we heard, you know, they were talking about opting out, you know, whether or not their meetings have caused any change. I know that Mr. Ingram works with one of their council members. Maybe he has some insight on where their headspace is now.
So just in discussions with, you know, someone that I, you know, do talk with or speak with over on the Kingsland side of things. As of today, it does seem that, you know, their course of action is to opt out. You know, and how that affects us is just, you know, it's not a reduction of taxes. It's just going to be collecting taxes from somewhere else, like Mr. Rogers stated. So, and what he stated was correct, that if we don't have the option for the local option sales tax, that if they opted out and we don't have the option, the only other option for us would be to actually increase the millage rate. So we're giving you a tax break and collecting it on the same tax, just in a different manner. Something I was going to suggest tonight, and I want to discuss with council, is our hearing, our third and final hearing where we would vote. We have that scheduled for next Tuesday, the 18th, I believe that's the day. Kingsland meeting is the following Monday on the 23rd, so I was going to see if it fits everybody's schedule to maybe push our hearing back to the Tuesday the 24th, 1 week. I've already spoken with staff to make sure that gives us enough time, depending on what we do, if they could actually get the notice to the state in time. Robbie,
If we were to do something along, and I'm understanding what you're asking, but I would recommend go ahead and having our last hearing next week and then the vote on the following week.
That works too.
Because we've already advertised that final hearing, And that would be,
And then have our special call meeting for the following
Correct.
Tuesday. That would
Yes.
work too, so we can make our
if
decision.
that was the will of the council.
We can make our decision after we know exactly what we're looking at to be able to vote on the, what we actually have in front of us, be it if it's going to be an option for a lost tax or not. I think that is very important, so that to see, we could do it our Tuesday and guess what Kingsland might do, but we don't know that absolute. And again, I think they've been more steadfast than ourselves on opting out, just to see if that's their official decision, then we can make our vote after that.
Right. I'd also like to point out that while the county has a freeze in place, the city of St. Mary's does not have that. So if we opt in, that puts somewhat of a cap on how much your property value can be raised. Right now, there is no cap for the city of St. Mary's. The other thing is, many of us attended a Cities United Summit in Atlanta and spoke with our state legislature. And there is, like any bill that's introduced, there are going to be some unintended consequences, and I think other municipalities opting out is one of those. So there is an appetite, again, an unknown, for fixing the fact that if we were to opt in, we would be able to ask for a referendum on the FLOST. But again, that hasn't happened yet, but we are told that they are interested in fixing some of the problems that they're aware of with the bill.
Yeah, and to her point, other possible changes, and that's, kind of some of the leanings towards the possible opting out, I believe, with a lot of the municipalities, is that there are a lot of proposed changes. And, aside what she stated, one is actually giving us 2 months later to decide, to actually push back this deadline of March 1st to May 1st that hasn't passed yet. And I would love for that to happen, to give everybody a chance to take a step back and put some more thought into this. And then there's also a proposed adding a 3-year pullout if it doesn't give the intended results that you thought that it would. As it sits, I believe, does anybody know the number that if we opted in, how long are we opted in for? I heard a really high number. I want to make sure somebody else.
According to the way it's written presently, and it was passed, once you're in, you're in.
For 50 years, is that the number that I recall?
Once you're in is the wording that I
So
way I
you're
read it.
in. So it's a long number. So it's being said that they're potentially thinking about making a tweak to give you a 3-year opt-out period, which isn't available yet. And that would also help the decision as well, that if it doesn't give the intended results, that you have the option to get back out of it. But as it sits, you're locked into this thing. I don't know why they would put it that damn good, but they have.
One of the reasons I think they've done that is that in November, everybody voted on the House Resolution 1022. And House Bill 581 was contingent upon House Resolution 1022 passing. And 66% of our voting public in St. Mary's voted in the general election. And of those, 67% actually voted yes on House Bill, on the resolution, the House resolution, which created House Bill 581. Now, the reason that's important is that both the Georgia Municipal Association and the Association of County Commissioners in Georgia worked with the legislature for 3 years to get this cap. So the first 2 years, they could never agree on anything that they thought would be good for the homeowners, and that was the goal of working on it. The third year, they finally, all the groups, the ACCG and the GMA and the legislature came up with what they thought was a good solution, and it passed unanimously. So there is a sentiment that those municipalities that opt in may have favor with the legislature when it comes to funding for infrastructure and roads. They know we need money to run the cities. So, again, this is an unknown, but it was something that they talked about. So we need to be aware of that too. And of course, the safety valve, as somebody pointed out, is the, for running the city, is the millage rate. You know, nobody wants to raise that, but if we have to and we cannot or do not agree on implementing a FLOST, then the millage rate is our solution. That and financial prudence.
Anyone else?
Jerry Brumbelow, 805 Riverview Drive West. I appreciate all the extra information, especially from Lynn, but my thing is like she said, they worked on this bill for 3 years. So in the meantime, while they were working on that bill, my taxes are going up 20% every year. So now what I've heard is we don't know to opt in or opt out, but I haven't heard anybody say how they're going to keep our tax bills from going up 20% next year, 20% next year, 20% next year. And you can't do that without putting a lid on this, on these assessed values of these properties. And without the homestead exemption, you guys can't do that. So our taxes are going to keep going up like that. And Robbie had a good point. That last chart that he gave us, our tax index is going to like quadruple over the next 5 to 10 years. And that we should be able to run the city with all that new tax revenue coming in without having people that are living here currently, especially older people in little homes in St. Mary's, having their taxes go up 20% every year. You know, it doesn't seem like a lot when you go up $200 a year. But this thing, it's like putting money in a savings account. If I get a 20% rate, I want to be a millionaire in a few years because the money keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. And that's the way the taxes are. Taxes go from $400 a year in 5 years up to $1,200 a year, and there's no relief in sight other than 581. So y'all need to think real hard about that, okay?
Hello, I'm Joan Smith, 400 George Street, St. Mary's. I am all for keeping our homestead exemptions, city and county, because my assessment last year was $252,000. This year, it's $353,000. That's a big jump. And I'm like him, it just keeps going up, but the only thing that don't go up is your retirement check. So I am all for keeping the homestead exemption. Thank you.
Evening, everybody. I'm John Morrissey, 238 Cardinal Circle West. Sorry. I've been trying to understand the mechanisms that are behind all of this, and the only way I could do it is to really gross it up to the total city level. So if you all will bear with me for a second, I can throw some numbers. I'll try and keep it as straightforward as possible. But in particular, the reason I'm now even more interested is if you all have this. In the middle, it says optional sales tax for property tax relief. And I'll speak to that in a minute. But, so anyhow, the current budgeted annual millage for St. Mary's is going to be 5.4 million. And if the anticipated floss tax collection, if it mimics some of the other, well, and I'm rounding up, is 3.3. So that floss tax collection deducted from the millage, current millage, will create a new net millage billable of 2.1 million. So I don't know the mechanism of how it's going to work, and I think our finance department is trying to find out. So if you read the way this is supposed to work, the floss collection taken from the millage creates the new net millage 2.1, which is 40% of the current millage. So when you read this and they say optional sales tax for property tax relief. So that's the first number you think of, is that property tax relief. Remember that the second component of that is indeed floss 1% collection. So we're moving to, thank you, a consumption tax and a fixed millage rate. So we, as the city of St. Mary's, are going to go out and spend the equivalent of $3.2 million for goods and services as a 1% tax added on to the current tax rate. So when I read that you do get a property, it will probably look like a property tax relief on the bill, but on the other side of this equation is the fact that you will go out, we as a city will go out and spend $3.2 million in additional 1% sales tax. So I understand how they were trying to pose this in the legislature, but in the fairness of transparency, now our tax bill is essentially a reduced millage and an added 1% tax for floss, which creates basically the same number that we already have, $5.4 million. So I think it's important that we as citizens, and I went through this a couple of days before I felt comfortable that I had the equations right and the numbers right. So we have $5.4 million now. We'll have $5.4 million in a year or two, and it'll be bifurcated, or we'll have two components now that make up the same amount of tax that we pay during the course of a year. And again, I'm grossing it up based on the city of St. Mary's numbers because it's the only accurate way to be able to do it. But, and again, this is facts. The next thing is, if you looked at Mr. Horton's comments, 16% of that 1% number comes from people outside of the county. So essentially, that money is not, we're not paying that money as tax. So if you look at the net number, instead of $3.3 million, there's going to be $2.8 million that we as St. Mary's people pay out during the course of a year. What does that turn into? It's basically a net 10% overall tax reduction by the contribution of the people from outside of the county. And it's about $527,000. So I just wanted to make sure from a clarity standpoint how the equation works. It's basically going to net. You're not going to end up with a 40% tax bill. You're going to end up with 40% as a tax bill, and you're going to spend the equivalent amount as a 1% floss to net back up to what we're paying in tax, unless something grossly happens. And it's also now going to be variable depending on how the economy goes. So I thought it was important that I share I call it my guerrilla math. I just had to understand it myself and to make sure that I don't think the intent was to, in any way, not to be transparent, but they should have made it clear that once you have property tax relief, you also have additional sales tax added back in to create the number that basically you already have. It's very important. The only other thing is just a sidebar comment, I think, about the assessment notices. I understand how it's going to, could work with a CPI fixed number annually, and that will be on your assessment notice. I think it would have behooved the legislature to have a below-the-line market rate number of the assessed value so that we know what the current market rate for our homes are based on the assessors going around and valuing our property. Not that that's used for taxing, but we got to be sure that we don't confuse a lot of the people that are going to come in here to purchase homes and to the value of their neighborhoods, because St. Mary's over the last 20 or 25 years, and counts of people from one end of the spectrum to the other over all that time, spent an inordinate amount of time and effort and energy to build the brand and the value that is St. Mary's. And that translated into the assessors deciding that there was more value based on the market results than we had had year on year. That happened because the council and the citizens built the value of St. Mary's. School systems, quality of life, amenities, the visual impact, that was all built and invested by people like us. And the legislature has taken part of that tool away by not recognizing that and by fixing that assessed value. And that's all right, because there are other mechanisms to try and adjust. But there is no misunderstanding. The city has to operate at X amount of value in order to provide the services and the expectations that the citizens have. And you cannot operate without a revenue stream that's going to allow us to do that. The assessors and their value changes are part of the tax equation. We have the millage rate, they have the assessed value. The two combined create the tax rate that we see on our bill. So I just wanted to share my simple analysis of how the equations work, but also not to let us be mystified with the idea that we're going to see we are going to see a very interesting new tax bill. And now what we'll have is an ongoing consumption that we can't track. But you can't track it based on the gross up numbers at the city level. And it's important, I think, that we understand that 100% over here is going to become 100% over here. It's just going to have two components instead of one. So again, I just bring this up for everyone's consideration. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. And you can work out the numbers yourself. You can give me a call. I'd be happy to show you how it works. You know, I did pass basic math. I had a little trouble with algebra, but I got through it anyhow. But that's another story for another time.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick Harris, 102 Hamlet Circle, Cumberland Harbor. It's amazing how just one thing can get everybody's attention. I've lived here 2 years. We've had a plethora of things that we thought that St. Mary's needed or didn't have or we needed to fix. But then there's House Bill 581, and I've seen more people engaged in this over anything else. As a leader, I think we're trying to isolate 581 in the total big picture. We get paid to make hard decisions, and those decisions may not be fair and justifiable to everybody, but when you take it as a consensus, we think we're doing things in the best interest. I think outside, I go back to Jerry, and I appreciate everybody's effort that they've applied, city manager, Lynn, city council, the numbers and things, but for an old soldier, I like simplicity, and it's time to take the hill, and let's take the risk. I'm really not interested in what Kingsland does because they're a different entity. Their structure, how they live over there, the businesses that they have, it's just not St. Mary's. I think we need to look out at the future of what we see to be St. Mary's, and there is growth coming. So instead of just charging me, like Jerry said, 20% every year, I just moved from Atlanta, and my taxes here in St. Mary's are just as much as the house I left. But in Atlanta, I could probably sit down and rattle off some things that I was getting or justifiable. But here in St. Mary's, it's kind of hard. Well, what am I getting for the increase of property value? Let's take this opportunity, take a risk. I'm thinking opt in, but when you look at the 5-year numbers that the city manager proposed, we have growth, and it's our job as citizens, entrepreneurs, and I own Farm to Family, and city council, is to go out there and seek those people. We should be able to increase our revenue of people just driving up on the interstate. The reason why it probably doesn't incrementally just shock us to death is because when you look at it, when you get to the destination here on the river, there's very few things to do if you're not from St. Mary's. So we got to kind of send our tentacles out there and keep what we have aesthetically, but build more opportunities. And with every challenge, there's an opportunity. It's what are you willing to pay? It's easy just to, this is what everybody else did, therefore we're doing it. And it's easy you can make numbers validate anything. It's just a bottom line fact. If you got the smarter guy or gal that understands numbers, I don't care what side of the fence you get on, you can make it look good for your side. I'm kind of looking at all the constituents out here. I think it's time to take the risk and believe in the opportunities that are here in coming to St. Mary's, and what that's going to do, it kind of puts more pressure on our government. It's your job to make this place a vibrant place, economic development and things like that. We need to get away from, right now it's basically, the way I look at numbers, we're basically funding the operation of the city. And that should be flip-flopped. The constituents, homeowners, pay 60% of the tax base, and business are 40%, and it should be the other way around, where businesses are bringing in 60% and then we pay 40%. I think it's doable, but what are we willing to do to make that doable? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Anything else from council?
I'd just like to say I thank everybody for getting up and speaking and giving us feedback. As you can tell, it is a tough decision to make since we had almost an equal amount of people speak on both sides of this thing here in this room today. I will say one thing in regards to saying it doesn't matter what Kingsland does. The only way it does matter what Kingsland specifically does is the option for that floss tax. Because if they opt out, we can't get it, and then we're just back in the same circle of getting a break on property taxes with the homestead, but then increasing the millage rate of property taxes to get it back. And that's the only reason why Kingsland matters. It's just it does matter on our options if they opt out, what we can do. I've been given a relatively high number of percentage of the whole state that is opting out, and I don't want to spew that number because I don't believe it's accurate. It's a very high number that I was told by more than one person. And there's no way for me to track that and say a percentage, but based off the number as high as it was, I do think an actual majority of the state is opting out. You can Google GAHB 581 opt-out, and you can see pages and pages and pages of cities that are opting out. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that that affects our decision here in St. Mary's, but there's a lot of people with a lot of questions out there, and I just hopefully they give us that time till May 1st to give us time to get more answers for the questions that we have. So that's all.
I appreciate what everyone shared with us tonight, and all the heartfelt thought process in this, and I thank you for that, and it means a lot, and appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
All right. Anything, Lynn?
No.
Yeah, I say, we've been studying this for months now.
Yeah.
And, if our tax digest, it has been growing, as has been pointed out, year over year, 10, 15, 20% growth. Part of that just from, values going up because it's a desirable place to live, and values are going up because construction prices cost more and more. But we've also had growth of new homes that have pushed our digest up. And our main weapon, our main tool, if you will, is the millage rate. We have, fees and licenses and those kinds of things, speeding tickets on your way home, to generate revenue. But our main way of bringing in income, to operate the city is through the millage rate. And when that digest grows, we are required by state law to advertise what is considered a rollback rate. So it was 6 mills, now it's 5.4. That gives the city the exact same amount of money. That theoretically, if your house value did not change, would be a reduction in taxes to you. But if your value has gone up, then, maybe you pay in the same thing you paid before. But if your value went up at a growth rate higher than the rest of the community, you're in a more desirable neighborhood, or you're whatever, or you did something to your house, then you end up paying more taxes, even though the millage rate dropped. It's a very convoluted process that happens, and it just makes the decision-making process that much more difficult. Businesses, renters, others that don't get this exemption, part of that equation. But as Ms. King pointed out, the voters, many of who are homeowners, spoke loud and clear about the desire to have an exemption. So, like I said, sitting up here trying to take it all in, trying to make the correct decision for our city and what's best for everyone, and your input is critical to that. We certainly want to try to do the right thing, and so I thank you for being here tonight, and if there's nothing else, I'll close the meeting.